My name is Mike Turner, and today I'm going to talk to you about a better way to invest for passive income that totally just blows every other method you've seen out of the water. And I'm going to show you exactly. So I'm going to show you how to quickly build a retirement pension from mobile home investing. Now, before you jump to conclusions, just hear me out because you're going to see some things in here you likely haven't seen before. Okay, because I built a $2.6 million income stream in 2 years, starting with zero, without tenants, without banks, without owning any rentals. I'll show you how I did it. And I personally have done 24 cash flow flips, which I'm going to show you a spreadsheet in just a moment, that they generate over $87,000 a year in passive income so far, and it's growing every month with no debt and no personal capital invested. What? Yeah, let me show you. Okay, here's my spreadsheet. Now it's a little messy because I love numbers, right? And so this is, Mike's pension for cash flow flips. I have 24 of them at present, and those generate $18,000 a month in total. Basically, what I'm going to be showing you is how cash flow flips work. I'm going to come back to this to get more details, but of those 24 properties, they generate $18,000 a month, which equals $218,000 a year, and these are all set up through 30-year mortgages. 30-year mortgages, which, will have a planned payout of $6.5 million. Now, will they all go that long? I don't know. Not likely, but some will turn over, some will re-up, some will sell off early, and so forth. But right now, it's scheduled. I'm scheduled to get $6.5 million in these assets. And you can see this is my interest rate here, right here. And so I'm averaging about 12% on these mortgages that we're setting up. But I'm not, investing like a bank does, like exactly the same way. A bank who's going to do a $100,000 loan is going to have to risk $100,000. I have a very good equity position. Just like you do a fix and flip, or you get it for less and then you sell it for more because you kind of create equity and opportunity. Well, I do the same thing. And so with this number right here, okay, that my kind of actual rate of return because of the equity. So for example, a normal bank's going to invest $100,000 on a 12% loan. It's going to make 12% return. I'm maybe what if the bank only had to invest $50,000 to still invest $100,000? Let me say that again. What if the bank only had to put in $50,000 to get the return of a loan for $100,000 at 12%? Well, they'd likely make double the money because they're only having to put half the money in order to make, double the money. So their actual rate of return might be closer to 24%. This is why I have such high spreads on these. But the reason I don't have any money invested in these things because I bring in JV partners. I like to call them pension bankers because they don't do anything in the sense of other than, supply the money side. I go out and find these deals, put them together, get it all set up. I do all the things and then share equity, share ownership on these properties. And therefore, I don't have to borrow anything. Makes my risk extremely low. And neither do these guys because I'm giving them in at such a good equity position. There's no borrowing. There's no other partners. There's no other liens on these properties. So my column's way over here in the green. So this means I have not only do I have zero money invested, I'm kind of up 20,000, just on, having my partners pay me more than I needed basically. So I have more extra cash, but I'm basically making of that 18,000, 7,000 a month in passive income, which is basically 87,000 a year in passive income. And scheduled for 2.6 million over the next 30 years. These are current deals. I'm doing this right now. This isn't something that I did in the past. This is an actual strategy that's actually working. Okay. So I'm going to get into the details of this, but just so you know that because when you invest like a bank, you really are doing it passively. I mean, there's no maintenance and repairs. There's no, management need. Okay. It's basic. And so it's great for passive. And so let me go back to my slides. And so essentially here, my current, as I mentioned, this is my current, snapshot of what I'm currently at. And I did this in the last 2 years. So you can imagine if you could do something in the next 2 years that could pay you $90,000 a month in passive income. Like that's a salary. It's like a salary, but you don't have to go to work. What would that do to your life if you didn't have to go to work, but you could still make $90K a year? I think you could have a lot of fun with that opportunity, whether it's giving back, whether it's helping out family, going on amazing trips. And again, I'm just going to start it. I'm going to double, triple this amount. My goal is to get over 250,000 a year and totally passive, because then that allows me to kind of just do all the things that I want to do, right? And so I my goal of doing that over the next 3 years. I have a community that I've created that I'm helping other people do this as well. But we're all kind of building our pensions together. It's super fun. So the game changer. Okay, cash flow flips equals recurring cash, no debt, and no tenants. Historically, this is what we had to do in order to get passive income. We'd have to buy a rental property, get a bank loan on it, and hopefully make some sort of spread, and do that over and over and over and over again. You know, just like Monopoly, right? You start off as houses and you work to apartments. How many doors can you own? The problem is that tenants, man, it's like, you know, you're constantly dealing with issues with that. And, you know, and then tax increases, insurance increases, then repairs and maintenance, all that eats into your cash flow and your time. So, you know, this was my old belief. I read all the real estate books just like you did, right? And passive income equals rentals or REITs or something like that, you know, and that, you know, there is a chance, you know, the people have proven this, right? People have proven that you can own rentals and become extremely wealthy with it. They've proven it. But they're really like the one percenters. Because if you really, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. Not only have I been investing myself, but I was formerly a real estate broker that focused on investment properties. I watched a lot of people try this game. And what happens is it works until the market shifts. And having having that liability, the bank debt, it's ultimately what sinks everyone's ship. You know, because they may have some success, and then they get more debt because they create more assets, and their debt compiles. And yeah, it's a decent tax strategy, but ultimately it's the debt that sinks their ship, that makes them go start back to zero or far beyond zero. My new belief is that true freedom comes from reoccurring cash flow you own and control. So if you think about any business, the most probably arguably the most profitable thing, the most valuable thing you could do for your business is to create more reoccurring income for it. And the less time value that's associated with getting that reoccurring income, the better. So think of like a software company, right? So once it gets you in and you like the software, you often keep it for years. That makes it a very valuable to the business, because before they even have to write one check, you know, for, you know, your employees and all the infrastructure for your business, you already have this guaranteed kind of money coming in, this predictable income coming in. And for somebody who's been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years and has had a lot of success with money and done a lot of great things, I've had a lot of financial stress in my life because I didn't have predictable reoccurring income coming in. I always had to go out and hunt more deals, hunt the next opportunities. I was always hunting, and I'm a pretty good hunter. But I'm getting tired. I'm getting older. And I always knew passive income was the right path. But every time I tried to go out to get it, it wasn't passive. And it just like, it would work for a little bit sometimes, and then something would shift. And then, you know, I'd have to rebuild, or it just was never really passive. Okay. So I've had to find new ways of investing and in new niches. Okay, speaking of niches, I ignored mobile homes for basically 20 plus years. We all know the same reasons, right? Mobile homes lose value, they're hard to sell. You got park managements to deal with, like, you know, like high turnover, you know, and this is what I knew and understood. And as I watched real estate, I could prove it. The thing that changed was the market. So the market has changed for mobile homes. And here's why. Mobile homes used to be kind of a lousy bet. You know, the parks have always been a pretty decent bet, but the owning the homes themselves was a poor bet. And here's why. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, okay, cities, townships, all across the United States were saying yes, yes, yes to new mobile home parks. And there was mobile home manufacturers all over the U.S. just busting these things out, constantly making them. And they were making them at such speeds and volume that they were getting the cost down on them pretty darn low. So if you bought one, say you bought one for $25,000, a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in 1992, and it's a great house, but after 6-7 years, you're ready to upgrade, you got your family, you are always competing with new homes, a lot of new homes, new parks and new homes were coming online constantly. And therefore, the supply was always incredibly high. And therefore, and since they're building these at such low costs, well, you couldn't really compete with it. You're always competing with new. So it always meant you always had to sell for less. They never appreciated. It's not because they don't appreciate, okay? It's because there was too high of supply. Nothing appreciates in value if there's way too high of supply. If it's an asset in demand and there's a low supply, it will what? Go up in value. And that's same for any asset on the market. Okay? High demand, low supply means what? Rising prices. So this is what I learned. So 60s, 70s, and 90s, like this is what was happening. And then right about the turn of the century, right about early 2000s is when it seemed like pretty much across the board that cities and municipalities and townships, they all basically started saying, you know what? We don't want any more mobile home parks. Go ahead and try to put one in today. Forget about it. No one's saying yes to new mobile home parks. It's been that way for over 15 years. Okay? It's really hard to put in a mobile home park and get approval on it. Nobody wants to say yes to those anymore. Now, you might have seen some RV parks go in, but a new mobile home park, whew, man, it is darn near impossible. And it's been that way for about 20 years. Okay? So what that means is, it means that the supply has been restricted and is restricted and will continue to be constricted because these are out of favor, and therefore they can't add new parks, which means the manufacturers can't keep building at the same pace that they were, and therefore the volume is coming down, the supply is coming down, and meanwhile, what's happened over the last 20 years? Affordable housing has gone from like a major issue to a crisis. All across the United States, it's a crisis. And the lack of affordable housing. And so what has this done? Well, right now, in just about any city across the United States, there's probably some mobile homes in a mobile home park, okay? And they're likely the most affordable home in your city that you live in, okay? And so they can often be purchased, used for $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $75,000, while traditional homes are selling for $300,000 plus in many cases. So depending where your market is, the numbers change, obviously. But where I live, the median home price in my area is well over $500,000. Okay, you might get a starter home around $300,000 if you search hard and low, but it's not going to be fantastic. Okay, I'm selling remodeled mobile homes an average of $80,000, $90,000. So under $100,000 is my average. I often pick it up for something far less than that. And so mobile homes are this great source of affordable housing. But there's just a problem with them. The problem is that banks don't like to finance on them. 99% of all banks and lenders out there do not lend on these mobile homes and parks, even though they are the most affordable housing option in the area while we have a housing crisis. What does that create? Ding, 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 opportunity, okay, to solve a need in your community. And that's what's great about this model is that as I got into start working with mobile homes, and the whole story of how I got into was really accidental. And then I had some amazing, light bulb moments of seeing how much money I could make. I was previously a real estate broker selling luxury homes, $1 million properties, where I was making $30,000 to $50,000 sometimes when I sold these properties. I started flipping mobile homes and started often making that same amount of spread, and it was less drama and it was easier than it was selling these $1 million homes. And so this is what happens when you have a supply and demand issue, And so these mobile homes, so what's happened with them, people think, oh, these are built poorly and, they kind of just disintegrate over time. Well, first off, all homes will deteriorate over time if you don't take care of them. If you don't fix the roof and the water comes in, they're going to lose value. Okay. And if you never update anything, eventually things are going to stop working, get worn out, and the home's going to be worthless. This is why people can do fix and flip, right? Because the homes need some love. They're outdated. You make them desirable again. You can sell them for a heck of a lot more. Okay. Because people love having that nice finished product. Same thing with mobile homes, right? So the people often purchase these things, especially in the past, if you thought it wasn't ever going to really increase in value because, again, the supply issue is so high, well, then no one really ever fixed these things up. Okay, so they didn't put much time and energy into them. They just used them while they had them and then moved on, right? And so this has been the trend. A lot of people spend a lot of money updating them unless they plan to be there for a long time, and then they'll do the roofs and they'll do the AC and the furnace and things like that. But often it still looks like 1982 inside. But that's just cosmetic, right? So this is what I find. This is why there's an opportunity. I buy these things. They're often not in bad shape. I don't buy the really bad ones. And I can then improve the value with them to make them a lot more desirable and still be priced far less than new ones in my area, because the cost of new ones is what? Going up, 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 and up, especially now this whole change in the world about getting materials and tariffs and the supply chains getting all messed up. The likelihood of the mobile homes price coming down anytime soon is very low as far as new ones, right? They're probably going to keep going up in cost. So there's a real market for these fixing, flipping, and these used ones. And what I found is that the real gold mine is becoming the bank on them. Okay, so even though I like getting the nice big paychecks and flipping them, these things are hard to purchase because not everyone has cash. So my old belief, to invest, you needed to borrow money. And so this is another critical aspect, because how can I offer owner financing, seller financing, be the bank on these things, anyway, right? Well, and so sometimes you got to borrow money to do any kind of real estate investment. This is what I always thought, right? Because it was taught as a good strategy, because you can leverage it. You can use other people's money to acquire assets and get higher rate of return on the money you do have invested. It makes sense, except for the banks suck. Okay, they don't care if the market changes and all your tenants stop paying at once, like they did with me in COVID or in 2008. All right, they don't care if you're just one payment late. They wreck your credit, right? And then they just don't have any. They don't care. And so I'm not a big fan of borrowing money, because it's liability, it's debt. And the more that assets you have, basically many people have, the more liability they have. So my new belief is, don't borrow. You want to actually partner to be the bank and not the landlord, okay, as well. So here's these two concepts, kind of drilled down a little bit further. Instead of giving a bank, like let's say you buy a property and the mortgage on it is $1,000, and you're hoping with it rents for $1,500, and you're hoping after property management fees, taxes, insurance, and occasional maintenance, that you make something on the property, right? This is a common scenario. And a lot of the times you don't. And so now you're hoping on appreciation, which has worked out for a lot of people, by the way, over the last, 20 plus years. The appreciation has done pretty well, other than that little blip on the radar between 2008 and 2012, right? And so, but overall, appreciation has been a really good bet for many, many decades with real estate. And it probably will on some level continue. However, I feel like we've seen a lot of the recent gains, and we should expect a lot more plateauing for a while, because COVID really kind of forced a lot of gains prematurely. But still, if you are borrowing that money and the tenant stops paying, you still owe the $1,000, whether you get to 1,500 or not, right? Right. And if it turns into a big drama, and then it can be really expensive for you. So somebody who has lots of money, this is not that big a deal to them. Somebody who's just getting started in real estate investing, this kicks their ass. And this goes on for a long time, or some sort of issue, which can happen, some sort of weird, story. We've all heard them. If you've been involved in real estate investing for any length of time, weird stuff can happen. And which means income can stop for a while, and that can financially cripple some people. Like me in COVID times, like, geez, like all tenants stopped paying at once. Ouch, right? Same thing in 2008, 2009. Thought I was positioned pretty well. I was helping a lot of people invest in real estate at that time too, and I thought they were positioned pretty well. But no one could really predict the level of craziness that was about to unfold. And we all thought the market correction was due. It was a market landslide instead. And so it really crippled anybody who had a lot of debt. Okay, so don't borrow, partner instead. So what does that mean? Partner means, like, instead of giving that $1,000 to a bank so they get richer, why not let somebody else who has some money to invest, who's got their money in risky places like the stock market and other crypto and other crazy places, which might do okay, but also might go down to zero or change rapidly, and it's not tied to anything, right? It's like paper. It's like you can see your money on the screen, I guess, but they're much safer to actually get your returns back every month. Like cha-ching, cha-ching every month, like a pension, get paid your return every month back. That's what you want. That's safer. That's going to give you peace of mind that you have enough passive income to cover all your household expenses. That's financial freedom right there. And you can get that to a with a partner. So now you can bring in someone else you may know, maybe a colleague, maybe somebody you've met in the past, maybe somebody you meet in an investment group, whatever. They might have $100,000 to invest, and so instead of giving that, borrowing it from the bank, give it to them, give them part, ownership, part equity in this an investment property you have, and so now $1,000 goes to them, 500 goes to you, and then now you don't have any risk, right? Because if something happens to that property, well, now you have a partner. You're going to try to, now you have two people that can help solve that problem. And there's no risk of like the banks coming after you and wrecking your credit and all that kind of craziness. Okay. And the money partner is really going to like you on the team because you know what you're setting the deal up. You know the tenants, you're handling all this stuff. They're kind of like the silent partner, but they're there, they want it to be successful and they're relying on you to be successful. So it's a good partnership. This is a great way to invest, to have like JV partners. This is how I recommend it. Don't use banks, use partners, because now you can both, help each other out, both grow your wealth and not have this liability thing. Like, why do that? There's no real reason when you have people out there who want to have their money invested smart. And if you're smart with real estate, partner. And if you have money and you want to invest smart in real estate, find somebody who's really good with real estate and invest with them. Okay. All right. That's how you do that. And being the bank and not the landlord. Oh my gosh, you guys. So I started doing this 2006, 2007. And it's really a cool strategy because, when you stop being a landlord, it means you don't have any expenses. You don't have any drama. You don't have it's just like steady passive income. The fact that you can set it up for it to pay for 15, 20, 30 years is a wonderful source of passive income. You do that multiple times in your portfolio, it's just going to turn into so much mailbox money for you. You have not having to do anything. It's wonderful. And so what I love about mobile homes, particularly the ones in the parks that the banks are ignoring, which I'm lending on, well, they're not even real estate technically. They're an asset. They're housing. Okay, they're in demand. They make good returns, but since they're not technically real estate, you don't have to go through the same kind of drama in case like you would with like a normal foreclosure. Because that's the downside of being the bank is like, gosh, it's all great until you have to do a foreclosure. Well, one, I've never had to do a foreclosure in all the 20 properties that I've had. I've had some people had to give it back to me, but the process is a little bit closer to like an eviction than it is a foreclosure. So the process is so much easier. Okay. And so I work with people the best I can. If they have a plan to get caught up, great. We work with them. If they don't have a plan, there's like having a financial emergency, no problem. We just take the house back. It's pretty easy. We resell it and we make even more money. It's not that big a deal. Right? It's really, especially if somebody knows what they're doing, it's not a big deal at all. So this is how I do things now. So what are cash flow flips? I've kind of just been spelling out like in little segments, but here's the four main ingredients. Okay. You find affordable home deal, right? Below market price. This is kind of all real estate investments starts with the deal, right? You want to find something below market price in any case. And what I do is I like to do the mobile homes. You can do this with traditional housing though, by the way, but I like the mobile homes because again, there's this need for helping with financing on it, right? So I go out and find a deal, and there's lots of motivated sellers in mobile homes inside these parks because people get into these financial pickles and all of a sudden, but they still have to pay this lot rent on these properties. And all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, the parks threaten them, to evict them, and they don't have enough money, even though their house is paid off, they don't have the money to move it out of the park because that can often cost, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes to get it moved to a new spot. So they don't have that means. And so they risk kind of losing everything. So you can get very motivated people selling in these parks. And so they're just lucky that they're very happy to get something, right? And so that's kind of like the most extreme thing. But there's a lot of people just very motivated and they just can't stand paying any more, lot rent. And so so it's not that hard. And then a lot of times these homes have been neglected. So even if they are, not, super stressed about selling, they just want to sell the place. Well, okay, but they haven't done the roof or they need to there's just a lot of deferred maintenance on this thing. Well, unless you're a buyer that knows how to take care of those things, it's hard to sell that property. Hard. And so, they just end up selling it for a lot less to find, because it's the same reason why people can find deals on fixers, right? Anytime it's a fixer, you're not going to get much money for the house. And that makes it for an investor an opportunity to come in, add value, and make it worth more. Yeah? Okay. Agree, number one. Number two, add value and improve it, right? So if it needs some love, we improve it. Now, sometimes this can just be better marketing. It doesn't need to necessarily mean that you need to be a contractor or have this skill or have money to, fix up these properties. It sometimes means that, but a lot of the times it can just be the reason why the house didn't sell before, because there was these terrible photos on it, sat on the market forever, and eventually someone's like, just kept lowering the price until you stumble upon it. You're like, wow, this is one heck of a deal. And then you kind of just clean it, and then take better photos of it, put it all back on the market, and wham, a huge jump in value, resale value, huge jump just from that. Okay. And then, okay, so you've enhanced it, you've got better marketing on it, and now you offer seller finance to an end buyer. Now, anytime you offer owner financing, on a deal, you could always sell for more. And this is why I've done this, for countless times over the last 20 years, whether it's for my properties or somebody else helping sell a property. I understood the seller financing piece, especially in that luxury home space, right? Because you think about, like say somebody's trying to sell a $2 million home. Well, if the market's slow, well, eventually they start dropping the price. Well, they might get an offer at 1.5 or something like that. But if they had offered $2 million with owner financing with a down payment of, $300,000 or $500,000, the likelihood they might have got that thing sold is much higher without them having to drop their price. Now, if they didn't need, so they basically then can turn that asset that home into a true investment asset. Because if you've ever seen what an amortization schedule looks like, if you ever purchased a home recently, there's these disclosures now when you're signing your loan docs that show you, like, if you over the course of the life of this loan, how much you actually pay for the mortgage. So for example, if it's a $150,000, mortgage, you might end up paying close to $500,000 before you pay out this 30-year mortgage out. It's a huge amount of money that goes to interest. And by the way, that most all is coming in the early years. And so if you turn your property into a seller financing deal, you'd sell it for triple, okay, on average. And you create a great passive income stream, kind of like an annuity or like a pension, right? And so you can sell for more and you can sell quicker, and it can be lots of benefits. Now, the reason why people don't like to do this, or people are nervous about seller financing, because it's this thing about, it's that, well, what if I have to foreclose on the property? What if I have to take it back? What if they stop paying? Well, these are things that are real and can often be something that it keeps you from doing it, right? And these are real things, but there's ways to manage it all. There's ways to minimize all of this risk. I've had some people be late. I have not had to foreclose on any of the properties I've done. I've taken a couple back. It's really not that complicated. And every time I did take it back, I made more money. So it's just not as scary if you know what you're doing, and particularly with these mobile homes in the parks, because you don't have to deal with the same sort of issues you do with traditional real estate. Yeah. Meanwhile, 99.9% of all real estate investors avoid this type of asset, okay, and this style of investing. Why? Because they don't know. Anyway, I'm telling you, this is a gold mine, right? You've seen my portfolio. I just started doing this, even though I've been investing a long time. I will soon have this amazing retirement pension. Quickly, I'm building mine. It's really an awesome way to invest. And again, using JV partners instead of banks. So I didn't have much money to start, and I wanted to, invest for passive income. After 20 years of being a real estate investor and lots of highs and lows, and I had a lot of freedom because I was an entrepreneur. I didn't have a W-2 job. I haven't had one in over 20 years, and all my income comes from real estate, and I'm pretty good at it, but it was sometimes high and sometimes scary low. I didn't ever always know when my next deal was going to hit, or I might be things are great, and all of a sudden something crazy happens, like COVID, or something crazy happens, and it's just like market cools off, and then my income stream just disappears, right? And so that got old. So I figured out a way that I can invest in cash flow and I can do that in my own market. I didn't have to go out to the Midwest and find cheap houses to try to make my rentals work, or cheap houses in the middle of nowhere to even do, these seller financing deals. Like, I didn't want to have to go out of state in order to invest. Now, I do invest some out of state, but I'm saying I don't have to. I can invest in my backyard because there's plenty of mobile home parks in my area, in my vicinity, within drive time. And I just like that because sometimes I like to go look at it before I buy it, right? And so I use JV. So, but I didn't have a lot of money because, after like COVID hit me for a few different, like actually I did really well during COVID. And then it was right after COVID was when just doing fix and flips during COVID. And then right after is when I had issues with interest rates going, doubling. And that's when the market really, punched me in the stomach. And I was like, all right, I need something more consistent. I need something more reoccurring. And I just to try to devour this problem to find out, taking all my 20 years of trying to figure out, how do I actually solve this? How do I create recurring income and not have debt, right? And be able to invest in my own backyard and make amazing returns and really figure out this retirement pension idea that I've been thinking about for decades. And I figured it out, and I figured it out through a couple of these 4 ingredients, right? And so, and I can avoid the debt by bringing in partners. It's wonderful because now I can invest with my friends, with my families, with people in my community that have heard about what I'm doing. They're like, wow, that's cool. You're kind of helping out, the affordable housing, and this is kind of solving a need in my community. And it's a cool way to invest. I tell you how many closings I go to these borrowers where I'm offering them financing and they're finally get to own something when they never thought they were going to be able to own something. And there's, half of these ones, they're tearing up because they're so excited and proud that they're going to be able to own something and not have to rent. It's really a cool thing. Okay. All right. Outcome. If you pull this off, you do these cash flow flips, you're doing a flip, but you're doing it for cash flow and you're setting it up in a smart way like I do, well, then you're really setting yourself up for 10 to 30 years types of passive income. And I mostly do 30-year mortgages on my property. Sometimes I do 15. Occasionally, if somebody's putting a huge cash down payment, I'll shorten the years on it. And I work with partners on these. And by the way my partners can come in, their money isn't stuck. That means they don't have to have their money tied up for 30 years. They can come in and out because it's like shares. If you want in, they have like shares, and the amount of shares determines how much monthly income they're getting from it. And if they want to exit, we just find someone else to kind of buy their shares. And it's really easy the way I do it. Okay. So if you want to learn more, I created a course. Okay. And normally I charge for it, but if you go to this website, cashflowflips.com, you can get it for free. And I just walk you through like more details of actually how I find these deals, how I set them up, and how you can start growing a portfolio of these things. And then I also have this total big master class and all these case studies, like detail, like super details, like step by step by step, like minute details. So you could just kind of take a blueprint, exactly what I'm doing, and do it in your market. You can have a school website, a site for that, and you can check that out here. And if you want help, with getting this mentoring, I also offer that, so you can actually grow much faster, because now we can kind of I can just work with you on each one of your deals so you can move super fast. And, because ultimately what you really want is to get your pension built as soon as possible. Because as soon as you have that built, as soon as your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses, game-changing, life-changing type of scenario. Because now you have enough coming in where you're not having to trade your time. You're not a slave to the money anymore. Now, you still might go out and want to make more money, but you don't have to. If something happened to you, your family would be set. If you want to change what you're doing, quit your job, whatever, and follow a passion, go back to music, or, get a sailboat and do some awesome adventures on that, you're all set. You're all set for that. Maybe you want to go into politics. Maybe you want to go and, teach. Whatever it is you want to do, this could give you that opportunity to do that. Okay. And so anyway, this is the power of cash flow flips, right? There's no banks, there's no tenants, there's no debt. It's real passive income. Can you do this without, you're having any money to invest? Yes. Can you do this if you have money to invest, but you don't have very little time or expertise with real estate? Yes. Right? You can partner with people that know what they're doing, or you can do this yourself and find people who have money to do this. It's not as hard as you think. And I get a lot of pushback from a lot of people that are like, oh, mobile homes, they're a lousy investment. I didn't even show you how much money I've made from just doing cash flips. Okay. I do those too. And there's a reason why I'm doing really well in these mobile homes now. The market's changed. What used to be true about mobile homes is no longer true. Okay. Things have changed. And if you can then now invest without taking on the liability, boom, like, guys, the liability has sunk my ship 3 different times. I've built up, and then something happened, ass kicked, started back over again. You can become wealthy with debt, but I don't recommend it. I only recommend it, the bringing on lots of debt if you're already wealthy and you're just doing some, trying to pay less taxes. You're playing with your money with that. Fine, great, awesome. But if you're like me, you're just like, I just need a real estate pension. Okay, if I have the pension, less of this, all this other games, all this other noise doesn't really matter. So many of our decisions are based on like money, right? So much of our decisions are based on money because we have to bring in money in order to keep our world, our environment, our household, our situations working. And if you can eliminate that, well, man, it's just, I'm so excited that I found a way, and I'm not all the way there. Like I said, I'm only at like 90,000 a year in passive, which is great. Could I live off of that? Yes. But I'm really excited about getting that number, 3 times as high, so that it just really opens up so many opportunities for myself and my family. And anyway, I'm going to quit talking. You know how to find me. This is my website, personal website, MikeTurner.life. You can find me on the socials at Mike Turner Life as that handle. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. I'm exhausted. Reach out to me though if you like this video. Subscribe. I'm not sure how many videos I'm going to do, but I will going to continue to post this. I post up most of my stuff inside my community. All right, so that's where most of my content goes. So be sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, like it, subscribe, share us. Would be great, because this is a path that I'm trying to get the word out about it. This is why I'm offering the course for free. I could make money off that, but it's just, let me just show you what you haven't seen yet. And so you can see that there's a new way to no longer be a slave to that money. And you can do it pretty quick. Okay, take care.